All right, very good. All right, so we are officially recording, and like I said, I know that probably over the next few minutes we might have some people join us live, which is great. I'll have Tom speak here in a couple minutes, and then Jocelyn will turn it over to you. I run the chat, so if there's anything that feels like it should be asked or interjected, I will definitely kind of play that role. And then we can always circle back at the end for anything that is Q&A that might be specific to what you're talking about, Jocelyn. So, all right, Tom, take it away.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here, either live or watching the recording. Obviously, this past week has been extremely challenging for all of us. I've been really impressed with the healthcare provider community stepping up so quickly. We have nearly the entire country covered now. I think there's 3 or 4 states that we have outstanding, but when 36 hours or so, we're up over 100 mental health care practitioners. Even got a fair amount of Canada covered now, Jocelyn, which is cool. Pushing hard to get more coverage around the globe just to make sure that anybody who needs access, who was there, can get it. So just a heartfelt thanks from Jen and I to everyone out there who really stepped up very quickly to make this happen. So thank you very much. If there's questions or concerns about anything related to the games or the mental health initiative, you can always hit us up, info@crossfitmedicalsociety.com, and we will do our best to get back to you as quickly as we can. All right. Jen, if there aren't any specific questions about that, I think we can just go ahead and jump in. If people have things that come up while we're moving through, we can. But very excited to have Jocelyn here with us today. So Jocelyn is about as OG as they come. She is an L4. She has been on seminar staff for many moons. And I think she has owned her affiliate, CrossFit Brio, for 16 years, Jocelyn? Is that right, if I remember correctly?
2008.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. There's not many. Do you know how many there are that are over 15 years? I'm curious.
That's a good question. I remember asking one of the administrative girls at the games last year. They think maybe less than 100.
That's amazing. That's really cool. Yeah.
But I might be wrong on that number. I could
think about the thousands or 10,000 around the globe. That's a pretty cool accomplishment. But really excited to have you here. Jocelyn has extensive training, both in working with athletes and also in nutrition, which I'm going to let her delve into more. She did our newsletter piece this week, which was for this month, which is fantastic. And I'm very pumped to have her here to kind of expound on what she gave us initially and dig into it. So without further ado, Jocelyn, if I missed anything on your bio intro, please fill it in. But the mic and stage is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that introduction. We don't need to talk anymore about me. We're here to talk about health and nutrition and how those two things interact. My official topic in the newsletter, I called it the primer on protein. But we're going to take a meandering road to actually take a deeper dive into those things, to look at the trees. But we're going to start with zooming way out at first to look more at the forest, give a little bit of the context of modern medicine here and how we got to this point. So I'm going to share my screen. So we start here with the forest view of modern medicine. 20th century innovations through the 1900s. These were miraculous achievements of medicine and surgery. Things like antibiotics, insulin therapy for type 1 diabetes, eradication of diseases like smallpox, our ability through orthopedics and surgery to put people back together after injuries and accidents and that kind of thing. Truly remarkable achievements. So if we look at in the year 1900, life expectancy was 47 years due to a high infant mortality burden, high burden of infectious disease, lots of problems with public health and clean water. So we see our top 10 causes of death really revolve around those things: bacterial and viral infectious disease, accidents, that kind of thing. So through the 20th century, we have achievements in single factor diseases and therefore single factor cures. If you can eradicate the bacteria or the virus or replace the hormone that's missing, you can have these, what I keep calling miraculous levels of restoration of health. Nutrition experienced this as well through the early part of the 1900s, the discovery of all of the individual vitamins and then their associated deficiency diseases. So finally coming to understand the cause of things like scurvy and pellagra, and then being able to restore those single nutrients that were missing and complete recovery from those conditions. So now we look at modern life expectancy, 77 years, truly remarkable increase in 30 years of life expectancy. But when we look at the top 10 causes of death now, we see that they look quite different. 7 out of 10 deaths in the US, and I realize not all of us are in the US, I'm in Canada. Statistics look pretty similar in Canada, about 7 out of 10 deaths are attributable to chronic disease. These are not single factor diseases. These are systemic malfunctions. So part of the problem that we're up against now in trying to solve this mystery, this puzzle of chronic disease, is that in some ways we're stuck in single factor thinking. So the 20th century tools are no longer working. So if we're stuck in thinking, 100% of people with vitamin C deficiency will get scurvy, and 100% of people with scurvy, when given vitamin C, will recover, this single factor cause, single factor cure, it's not going to work when we look at systemic causes. Think of it this way, diabetes, we cannot characterize as a metformin deficiency. So not to say that we haven't made those miraculous achievements, but we're sort of working with the wrong tools for the wrong problem. It's like calling an electrician when you need a plumber. Like, we need to start to think in different tools, understand the problems in different ways so that we can get to better solutions. Right now, people outlive their health. So we've made these miraculous achievements in expanding life expectancy. Life expectancy in the US is 77 years, but health expectancy is only 65. So the number of years that an American can expect to live in good health is about 65 years, which means they spend about the last 12 years in poor health. So we need to understand that we're not necessarily living longer right now. We're just taking longer to die, which is not really what any of us would want. So we need to think about, what are we aiming at? To say that something is working, a treatment is working, what does that mean? Most healthcare systems, many practitioners, many educational institutions, they lack a coherent definition of health. And we're often confusing metrics and biomarkers with health itself. So we take that little journey back in time. 2002, Coach Glassman writes the seminal article, What is Fitness? And in there, he outlines what he calls the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. And he says that everything we care to measure about health sits well ordered on a continuum with values that are known to be pathological, they're sick, values that are within the normal range, wellness, and values that are exceptionally good or sit over here on the right at fitness. A state of true fitness will produce a person that has all their health markers in the best third of the range. So in this context, sickness, wellness, and fitness are different measures of a single quality, and that quality is health. Now, something that I'm going to take from my background prior to CrossFit was on the business side of things. Finance and marketing and that sort of thing. So something called Goodhart's Law, named after a British economist named Charles Goodhart. When a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric. So singular focus on an isolated measure that may help a function may actually harm the system. So as much as this was from economics, we can apply this to healthcare as well. If we only aim at the biometrics, at the targets, so we do things like Ozempic for the obesity, metformin for the glucose, lisinopril for the blood pressure, Lipitor for the cholesterol, Zoloft for the mood, etc., we haven't actually created a true state of health. Versus if we aim at fitness and understand that a state of true fitness will bring all those biomarkers into the best third of the range, we have to flip our thinking on that. Are we aiming at the biomarkers, or are we aiming at fitness? So if we understand that we should aim at fitness, then we need a definition for that too. And this, again, from the 2002 article, What is Fitness? We needed something empirical. measurable, observable, repeatable. Fitness is your work capacity across broad time and modal domains. Now, I hope I'm preaching to the choir here. Most people have read what is fitness, have read what is CrossFit, have done their level 1. If it's been a minute since you've done those things, I strongly encourage you to refresh your understanding of our methodology in these terms. I don't want to dwell on it for too long, but that we can take tasks, we can make them measurable in terms of, force, distance, and time, power output. We can graph our ability to produce power across all these different tasks. We can integrate the area under the curve, and we have a number. We can give fitness a measurable, observable, repeatable number. Now, this is just a slice in time. If we wanted to add a third axis here, which would be age across the years of your life, now we have a 3D model. So this is CrossFit's 3D model of fitness, which becomes health. Our definition of health, as in the volume under the curve. Health is your work capacity across broad time and modal domains across the years of your life. Said in much more simple terms, health is fitness that sticks. So we know we want to aim at fitness. How are we going to go about doing that? Well, here's where Fitness in 100 Words comes in, also from the same 2002 article. The first line, and I'm sure many of us are familiar with this, you see it on posters and on t-shirts and all over the place in the world of CrossFit: eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. And now if we pause to consider for a moment that the first line of a prescription for creating fitness has nothing to do with exercise or training at all. It tells us what to eat. Now, why would that be so important? Why do we need to eat? What is food for? Why would nutrition receive such primacy in a prescription for creating fitness? Now, when I have the opportunity, teaching level 1 seminars, and I ask people when we deliver the nutrition lecture, like, why do we need to eat? What's food for? Enthusiastic people will put up their hand and they'll go energy or fuel or some version of that, which is accurate. True, we need food to make energy, but it's also incomplete. There are many components to the diet outside of the hydrocarbons that we turn into ATP, if we want to get really technical, things that don't get used for energy, but are the structural elements, the building blocks needed to make every part of you, every bit of you is built out of something that you ate. Every cell, every tissue, every hormone, every neurotransmitter, every bit of you is built out of something that you ate. So we're going to park the energy discussion, the energy side of the equation for now. We can certainly return to that at another time of all of the different ways the body makes energy. And we're going to focus on the structural elements of the diet, all the things we need to create. Largely, we're going to talk here today about the muscles and the bones we need for that work capacity across broad time and modal domains throughout the years of our life. So let's talk about protein. In the nutrition prescription, eat meat is the first line. Eat meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds. So we start with eat meat. It's offered as a placeholder for animal products in general: meat, eggs, fish, dairy, etc. The primary macronutrient in these foods is protein. When consumed and digested, dietary protein is broken down into amino acids. Revisiting, maybe it's been a minute since you studied for the MCATs and had to memorize all these. There are 20 amino acids that the human body uses to build all of its various tissues. 9 of them are essential. Essential in nutrition has a specific meaning. It means we have to get it from the diet. There are 6 that can become conditionally essential depending on illness or training volume or injury or certain specific situations. And then the other ones are considered non-essential, as in you can make them from the other ones. So these 20 amino acids, think of them like the Lego blocks. The proteins and things we build out of them are like the structures that we can create. There are at least 20,000 different types of proteins that we know of that the human body creates from the foods that we eat. Some are very small. The hormone insulin is just 51 amino acids, very tiny. Other proteins are huge, such as titin, found in the sarcomere of the muscle. It's the largest protein in the body. It's composed of approximately 34,350 amino acids. Gigantic. So when we work out, we cause damage to muscle tissue as muscle fibers are broken down under stress. In the days that follow, our body uses the proteins from our food to repair the damage, producing tissue that is stronger than before and better prepared to handle that demand again in the future. One amino acid on this list in particular, leucine, triggers this process of muscle protein synthesis more than the others. We find high concentrations of leucine in whole foods like beef, chicken, pork, tuna, salmon, cod, cheese, etc. So while more thrusters and bigger clean and jerk are cool, as we progress through the years of our life, our muscle mass and muscle function becomes the single greatest predictor of how well we will age. A health pension account of sorts, muscle's been dubbed the organ of longevity. So here are just a few ways, and this is a very quick summary of all of the ways that skeletal muscle contributes to healthy aging. We could probably spend a whole weekend discussing all the different ways, but here are some of them. So skeletal muscle mass is the primary organ of glucose disposal. So in doing all the heavy lifting of keeping blood sugar at a healthy, stable level, muscle mass is the one that's mopping up the sugar out of the bloodstream. Exercise stimulates the translocation of the GLUT4 receptor to the cell surface, which helps pull that glucose out of circulation and into the muscle. That's the same mechanism of action as insulin. When insulin binds to the cell surface receptor, it also causes the translocation of GLUT4. So we can achieve the same outcome as insulin, independent of insulin, by using our muscles through exercise. And so on the long-term basis, having well-functioning skeletal muscle reduces our risk of type 2 diabetes. In terms of cognitive well-being, muscle is, not just for doing thrusters and heavy clean and jerks, not just for looking good in a mirror selfie. We now understand it to also be an endocrine organ, sending signaling molecules, myokines and myometabolites from the muscle to the brain, which have all kinds of impact on keeping a healthy central nervous system. Exercise stimulates the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which stimulates neuroplasticity and helps keep our brain functioning well, helps us keep our cognitive abilities well into our older years. Now, here's just a small sampling, but there are many, many, many studies that show that skeletal muscle mass repeatedly been shown to be the strongest predictor of all-cause mortality. And that's just to say who is most likely to die of anything. And this association holds regardless of age, regardless of BMI, regardless of all kinds of other things. The predictor is stronger than other well-known biometrics such as blood pressure. So skeletal muscle mass will predict who is most likely to die in the follow-up period. And there are several studies here that I've included, muscle mass and muscle strength with all-cause mortality among older adults. Provided the links here, the citations here, if anybody wants to do some further reading on these things. Low skeletal muscle mass increases your risk of dying in the follow-up period. So in short, more muscle equals less dead. So we need to eat in a way that supports having good, healthy skeletal muscle. Now, the bones. Let's talk about bone health. Bones might seem like a solid, unchanging structure, but like our muscles, they're actually living tissue that are constantly being broken down and rebuilt in a balance of activity between what are called osteoclast cells and osteoblast cells. So there's a constant remodeling, just like your house has to undergo, continuous repair and rebuilding to keep it in good shape. So too do your bones. We do have medications, as many of you are well aware, the bisphosphonates, things like Fosamax, that can suppress osteoclast activity and can produce increased bone density. Bone mineral density is measured on a bone density scan by changing the balance between breakdown and repair and rebuild. Less breakdown, same amount of repair and rebuild. But evidence is controversial over whether this actually accomplishes the goal of reducing fractures. So here again, we have that Goodhart's law, where if we just aim at increasing bone mineral density on the test, we just try to do better on the test, it's unclear of whether we're actually improving what we want to improve, which is having people not have major bone fractures as they get older. There are studies coming out now trying to find the exact right time frame of using these different medications or combos or using them in a sequence. Things like Fosamax, it's not advised to take them for longer than 5 years because it looks like what happens is you might end up with more bone mineral density, but it's worse quality bone. And so it's still just as, if not more so, prone to fracture. So we need to, again, kind of flip and think of this problem in a completely different way. So if we understand what bones are made of, there's the study on the Fosmax. Collagen. So we think of bones, calcium usually comes to mind. But what people don't usually know is that approximately 50% of the dry weight of bone is actually protein. So this protein is in the form of collagen, and it creates the structural matrix of bone to which the minerals calcium and phosphorus attach, like spackle, the hydroxyapatite that creates the actual mineral structure of the bone. Collagen is this wonderful, amazing type of tissue that gives bones both the compressive and tensile strength needed to support the body's weight and withstand huge forces. Bone is really an incredible tissue on par with the strength of concrete, really remarkable. So adequate protein intake is essential for bone formation and remodeling. Collagen requires large amounts of an amino acid called glycine, along with proline, hydroxyproline, and lysine. We find rich sources of these bone building amino acids in foods cooked on the bone, like ribs or roast turkey. Think of things cooked on their carcass. And things with the skin on, such as fish or chicken. There's high concentration of the collagen building amino acids in those things. Bone broth is a traditional food found and revered in many cultures around the world. It's a wonderfully nutritious source of the collagen building amino acids, along with many other wonderful nutrients that support good health. And it can be prepared from beef, pork, poultry, fish, ham, all sorts of different types of bones. Now, diets that lack these foods, the collagen sources of amino acids, are associated with lower bone mineral density and greater risk of fracture. So vegan and vegetarian diets that lack animal source foods or adequate sources of the collagen building amino acids. This problem is particularly pronounced in women. Approximately 60 to 80%, depending on what data set you look at, of vegans and vegetarians are female. And if the important bone building window, the anabolic window of a woman's life, is missed due to malnutrition, like through her teenage 20s and early 30s, a woman will arrive at perimenopause without enough bone tissue in her health savings account to last through the later decades of life. It's estimated that as a woman goes through the hormonal shifts in menopause, that she can lose up to 1/3 of her bone mass. So it's really important that we feed ourselves properly in order to have enough in our health savings account. Now, on the flip side, people that get more of their protein from those foods tend to have higher bone density. Of course, what we're looking at right now is all correlation, not causation. So we're just looking at people that tend to eat these kinds of things, tend to have this kind of bone density, but the observed pattern does hold in both directions. So the source of our dietary protein matters tremendously. We can't just say protein. We need to be more specific to say we need these amino acids, the ones that we said we find in meat cooked on the bone, things with skin on, bone broth, that sort of thing. But also just a high total amount of protein really is important as well. So dietary protein intake above the current RDA is associated with better bone health. The RDA, if you dabble in the nutrition world, the RDA for protein is considered to be paltry low, especially for older adults who will struggle with digestion and assimilation of dietary proteins. They have a harder time breaking them down and absorbing them. So total dietary intake needs to be higher. The RDA is set to avoid overt disease conditions, like deficiency disease conditions, which is not the same thing as saying optimal health. Those two things can be quite different. So in many circles now, the recommended intake for optimal health and function, especially in older adults, sits closer to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, or 2.2 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight, which is much higher than the RDA. And then if we see what happens, so the effect of this dietary protein intake, if we look at this analysis, finds adults in the age bracket of 70 to 75 in the highest third, the highest tertile of protein intake, have higher bone mineral density and lower risk of vertebral fracture when compared to those in the lowest third of protein intake. And why do we care so much? Why do we care so much about bone density? It's not just injuries, it's mortality. As we age, a major bone break becomes a serious mortality risk. So this follow-up on 758 adults over the age of 60 who fell and broke a hip found that more than 1 in 5 were dead within a year. And that happens from a variety of complications. Bed rest causes a massive loss of muscle mass and then function. There can be infections, there can be, blood clots and circulatory issues from being sedentary. A variety of factors contribute to such a high mortality. But it's no joke to say that we need strong bones to withstand and avoid these kinds of circumstances. So in short, stronger bones, less dead. We need these highly nutritious whole food sources of protein from, eat meat, as we said, the catch-all term for beef, pork, chicken, seafood, dairy, etc. These provide the essential structural elements in the diet to build strong muscles, dense bones that we need to maximize our work capacity across broad time and modal domains. Across the years of our life, those muscles and bones we build up allow us to not just survive, but thrive, tackling any adversity or taking on any adventure that comes our way well into our 80s and 90s. Now, I presented muscle and bones as two separate systems, but they're really not. And so a deficiency in skeletal muscle mass is very commonly associated with deficiency of bone mineral density as well, in a condition called osteosarcopenia, where osteoporosis and sarcopenia collide. So this paper is definitely worth a read, understanding that we can't just look at the bones in isolation. We can't just look at the muscles in isolation. We have to look at the body as a systemic whole. And then again, when we back ourselves up to that big picture view, it helps us arrive at better interventions, better treatments, better, if we want to call it cure, for these conditions. So here's a study. This is a randomized controlled trial. So far we've only been looking at associational type things. So this one is a 4-month intervention with women between ages of 60 and 90 living in retirement communities. They have a control group that only does resistance exercise, and they have an intervention group where they feed them lean red meat and have them do the resistance training program. If you scroll to the methods section of this paper, you see that they have these ladies doing squats, lunges, step ups, shoulder presses. So that's also part of why I love this study, is it wasn't just seated exercises with a resistance band. They had these girls doing functional movements, compound functional movements, just like we would recommend in CrossFit. And of course, as we could all predict, the nutrition plus training group gets more muscle mass, more strength, so muscle function. And really interesting in this study is that they reduce inflammation as measured by a marker called interleukin 6, IL-6. So interestingly, by adding red meat to the diet, they reduce inflammation. Sometimes there's a maybe myth floating around out there that eating more meat will cause inflammation, but this study finds the complete opposite. So diet alone is not going to do it. Exercise alone is not going to do it. But when we put the magic of these two things together, as we do in the CrossFit methodology, that's where the real magic happens. So we've observed patterns, right? These types of diets tend to be associated with these types of things. We have a proposed mechanism of the amino acid requirements of those tissues and why having more of them in the diet would support having better, stronger, more robust tissues. It's now also my pleasure to show you this stuff in action with a case study from a member of my gym, a real member at my gym. So 2006, she's 54 years old. She goes to the Mayo Clinic and has, a complete set of body scans done. The bone density scan comes back with a T-score of -2.6, which if you're familiar with how bone density scans are conducted, below 2.5. The report states severe osteoporosis. At the time, she's approximately 5 feet tall and 220 pounds, so she's in the category of morbid obesity. 2008, she starts CrossFit training at the age of 56. Never set foot in the gym a day in her life. She's extremely weak. I remember that she could not complete even a single lunge without assistance. I vividly remember her getting down on one knee and having to push really hard on my hands to be able to stand back up. So very low bone density, and very low muscle mass and function. Over those intervening years, she loses 80 pounds following the CrossFit methodology of training and the nutrition prescription, completely overhauls her diet. She used to have a very high sugar intake, changes it all, eats meats and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar, loses the 80 pounds of excess body weight, gains strength, becomes a total badass, deadlifting big weights, gains a couple grandkids in the process that she's able to keep up with and play with and all over the place. And as she's out there living her best life at the age of 72 this year, well on holidays in San Diego, riding an e-bike and crashes the e-bike and breaks a bone in her hand. And this triggers her doctor sending her for another bone density scan, which she had not been for a while. And the bone density scan at the age of 72 showed a T-score of -1. So slight osteopenia, the report comes back now. So what we're seeing on the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum is reversal of chronic disease. She went from sick, osteoporosis, to slight osteopenia. She brought herself into the normal range through 15, almost 16 years of consistent training and dedication to nutrition, reversal of chronic disease, independent of medication. I looked it up today. As of today, she's completed 2,321 CrossFit workouts at my gym. That's an average of just under 3 times a week. So hella consistent. And like I said, complete overhaul of the diet. So it's simple, not easy, but the solution, or could we even say the cure, is so simple. You might even call it elegant. I believe it was Coach Glassman who said, we sit in unique possession of an elegant solution to the world's most vexing problem, the things that we do here in our gym. So back to the question I proposed earlier, what are we aiming at? We're aiming at fitness that sticks. When you ask people, what do they want? What does health look like to them? What do they want their, final decades of life to look like? They're going to list a set of capabilities. They're going to say, I want to live independently. I want to live in my own house. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to play with my grandkids. I want to be able to do my hobbies. I want to be able to garden or build things or golf or play pickleball or whatever it is. They're going to list a set of capabilities. What nobody wants: to live in a nursing home, to lose their independence, to be a burden to others. So we're looking for the strongest hedge we can find against decrepitude. And there are nutritional components of the diet that must be obtained in order to build the muscle function and bone density that will be required to accomplish the task. And accomplishing the task is remaining an active and vital participant in your life. So we're adding more, not just years to our life, but life to our years. So as I said earlier, highly nutritious whole foods, sources of protein was sort of the theme of what we're talking about today. They provide those essential structural elements that are going to build our health pension account of our skeletal muscle and our bone density, so that across the years of our life, those big muscles and strong bones that we built up allow us to not just survive, but thrive and tackle anything we might want well into our 80s and 90s. So I'm happy to take questions at this point, or go back or revisit any of the things along the way. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see you guys again.
Jocelyn, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Jocelyn. I think that setting us up for the showstopper with your client, before and afters, we all know how powerful that is. But I think that, being a clinician and knowing how those conversations typically go when you have somebody come in who's already in their 60s and has, a Z-score that's that advanced, the discussion will very rarely be centered around what you can do from a lifestyle based approach, because it is inherently harder, right, to do it once you're older. There's a lot more things that are stacked against you, but I think it is so powerful to be able to show that it is completely doable, and that with some degree of consistency. And, 3 times a week is not that. It's not 5 times a week, right? It's not 6 times a week. It's 3 times a week consistently for years. And to do it in a way that addresses so many other core pillars of health, right? Because we didn't just give her Bosamax to make her bones stronger, quote unquote, if that is in actuality what happens, which, as you pointed out, is somewhat debatable. But I would venture to guess that her fasting insulin was better and her lipids are probably better, and her fasting glucose and her A1C are fantastic, and her mental and emotional well-being is probably significantly better. Unfortunately, Fosamax is not well tolerated by the vast majority of people. There's a lot of complications with it. A lot of them are GI, with dyspepsia and other esophageal issues. You have to sit upright after you take it because it can be so irritating if it gets like it's a rough one to do. And so I think it's such a wonderful example, because it's one thing to show somebody who does that in their 40s or 50s, but for somebody who does it in their 60s into their late 70s and then falls off a bike and all she does is break her hand, where
That's
she
exactly what I was gonna say. That's all she did, and she got back up.
if she hadn't have
But
done
I said, if I'm 72 and cruising on an e-bike in San Diego, I was like, I'm living my best life. That's for sure.
absolutely right. And that's what all of us want. I think the other thing that really jumped out too is that statistic of health expectancy versus lifespan in the last decade plus of our lives being ones that we live in poor health, right? And for all of us that are in the medical profession, right, and we've seen family members deal with this too, to have that last decade be one where we can't do the things that we want to do, our dependency on others is so high that it really undermines the quality of our life, is devastating. And the other line that I love, I just can't believe that I haven't heard of muscle as a health pension account before living in this space. It's beautiful, right? And that's how you think about it. And that's why I love the opportunity to have these discussions with people when they're in their 20s or 30s, right? And especially the female population, to talk about the importance of bone mineral density and muscle development now, right? When you can leverage your physiology more, because it becomes even so much more challenging later on. Because oftentimes, right, in the traditional medical setting, it's not talked about until somebody gets a DEXA, which isn't until they're 65 typically, unless they have risk factors per recommendations, which is crazy, right? So I think all of us who coach or work right in the CrossFit space, like, these are whiteboard moments that you can have about why it's important to lift heavy, right? About why axial loading is important, about why box jumps and impact training are important because of how that impacts our axial skeleton, right? So I just really, really appreciated that. And the clinical correlation was fantastic and really drove it home. I'm definitely going to borrow some of the studies that you put in there for our journal articles for the months coming up. I think a few of those were fantastic. So those will be great reads for everybody to get some more background on. It'll be really, really good.
All of those were linked in the newsletter
Oh, they were?
article.
Okay, fantastic. Okay,
So,
that's
I think a couple of them were hyperlinked in there.
very cool. Yeah, those are some really good ones.
It provides the data behind the things that we know and understand intuitively, right? If
100%.
you spend any time boots on the ground in in the healthcare space, whether it's in the affiliate or the clinic, those things, but the data supports, what you've observed in your life as well. I think going back to what you said about, living those last 10 or 12 years in poor health is really hard. And sometimes the side effects of those medications are really difficult. And, but let's be honest, like, so is CrossFit, right? CrossFit's hard. Showing up is hard. Doing thrusters and burpees and echo bike sprints is hard. But we just have to choose our hard.
Yeah.
And so I will choose my thrusters and burpees and echo bike sprints rather than living my marginal decade in poor health and losing my independence and declining into decrepitude and becoming a burden on my loved ones. So none of us are getting out of this life the easy way. We have to choose our hard.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. It really is. Jen, any other comments or thoughts?
It doesn't seem there to be very many in the chat now, except your wow, ... which I'm assuming, Tom, that was from the before and after. Was that when you dropped that comment in there from your
That's correct.
client?
Yeah.
I mean, I think when we look at why CrossFit is so impactful on life in general, taking into account the science and the research that supports what we know, right? But then we put it in context, like, how great is it that she's able to experience a social interaction in addition to all of the other things that she's doing to work on her health, as this lovely woman is in her 60s and in her 70s and creeping up to her 80s, right? Because we know that a lot of the times when you're faced with disease and what that burden does, that portion of loneliness also kind of segments into why those last years of our life, or the estimated, interpretation of what those years look like come with this fear of loneliness. And so I think that that's why CrossFit, or one of the reasons why CrossFit can be so beneficial, especially to our older population.
I think over the age of 65, loneliness is a greater mortality risk than smoking.
Yeah, it's it goes back to why the solution is so elegant, right? Because it touches so many bases: muscle, bone mineral density, metabolic health, community support. I mean, it's just across the board, right? And that's the whole mission, right? One of the central missions of the medical society is to make in the medical community at large more aware of the versatility, right, and the power that this tool can have for our patients who, to your point, we're reactively treating targeted biomarkers instead of addressing underlying root cause etiology and the multitude of inputs that lead into, right, this one outcome. And that's the thing too, when we talk about, and why that one study I love that you did for bone mineral density, because it isn't just about your nutrition in and of itself, as none of these things are, right? It's the multitude of inputs of consuming the right macro and micronutrients in conjunction with the right stimulus, right? It can't be one or the other. If you want to achieve optimal outcomes, it has to be all the above. And that's why it's so nice to have one thing that delivers on all of that, right? Which an affiliate does, which is
I
just.
think it does make turning to the research difficult, though, because that kind of single factor cause thinking really underlies the way studies are structured, right? Where rarely are we studying overall diets and big picture training programs. We're looking at one thing: supplementing with calcium or not supplementing with calcium.
Right.
Well, it's a big picture thing. Is it calcium and vitamin D and vitamin K2 and resistance training and sun exposure and all these different things that like, even the way research is conducted, still has us stuck a little bit in this lane of, single factor thinking, looking for the thing, the one thing, which makes finding interventional trials, things that aren't just correlation, but looking for causation, really difficult. And in things like bone density, where it can take years to see a difference on a scan, right? There's no point in having a DEXA scan in any less than about 3 years, even 5, before you see any real measurable change. That's a long time to conduct a nutritional study, right? So you can track fracture incidence and that sort of thing, but finding the data or obtaining the data that we would like to have, it may not exist and it may never exist, just given the realities of conducting those types of studies.
Really, really great point. And I think for all of us too, to keep in mind, the differentiating plausible biological mechanisms for things and for medications or for supplements, right? And comparing and contrasting that to efficacy and effectiveness, right? And real world results about outcomes that matter to us. Like, we always want to view research and data that we're looking at through that lens, which most of the time it's a real challenge to find things that are going to be truly applicable to outcomes that we actually care about. So I totally agree with you. No, it's fantastic.
I think that's the beauty of CrossFit, right? Is like, we have a way of measuring in the most empirical sense of the outcomes that matter, our ability to perform tasks, right? Like we said, everything that we want about aging well comes down to a list of tasks of things to be able to
and that's the stuff
navigate
we all
there.
think about.
So if we are tracking those things all the way along our CrossFit journey, we can be pretty assured that we're on the right track, right? We don't need to wait for a 15 or 20-year study to come out to say this works. We can see all the way along. We're measuring, measurable, observable, repeatable over time. We're comparing outputs, and that gives us that scientific rigor to assure us that we're on the right track
Right.
to accomplishing what we want to accomplish.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I was reviewing our a draft proposal for kind of our first research study with the CFMS with our research partners today. So it's coming together, right? And we have plans to over time add more to the literature, kind of supporting the methodology in a manner that makes sense, right? Measuring the things that people are actually doing and the outcomes that actually matter and make sense to us, right? So hopefully, with all of us working together with our different skill sets and areas of interest and expertise over time, we can really add to that, because we know that to a lot of the medical establishment, right, you have to start with those data points to be able to open the door and be able to have discussions to provide the reassurance so that people will refer patients to the methodology, right? So it's a starting point for us.
I have so much respect and admiration for what you're doing and trying to bring all these little silos and islands together, because I teach a level 1, and almost every time, how many of you guys have someone in your gym that's lost 100 pounds? And almost everybody will put up their hand. So this collection of, how many case studies does it take before now we have data, right? Now we have a data set, right? And if we can start to collect all these amazing things and put some numbers around them, and like the woman from my gym where she was like, hey, I had a bone density scan in 2006 and it said this, and now I got this one right now and it says this. Like, I think that's cool, right? And like, yeah, like, hell yeah, look what you did,
But I think too, what makes CrossFit unique at this point is, a lot of times when we're studying and doing research, trying to understand why things might be correlated or associated with each other, and then trying to come up with an intervention that's going to fix what we think is wrong or related. We kind of know what fixes it, right? We kind of know what the intervention is. And we, like you said, we've been using that in, experiential case studies and different things. And so now to be able to have both of those pieces together, it's a cool way to look at what can be done as the research, comes out and supports it. If we have a few minutes, Jocelyn, just for, to help, people that are looking to bridge the gap and understand more about how to take what they do in their practice in the gym or in their gym and go to the practice. You do a lot of things, right? Besides owning an affiliate and coaching and doing seminar and obviously being well-versed in nutrition, but you're employing that in practice too. So I don't know if you just want to kind of like highlight kind of your journey into having that be a space that you live very well in, and sharing some of that as a resource for people that might want to be doing that.
Sorry, you got to talk about yourself a little bit, Jocelyn.
Sorry.
But
like my personal journey, how
your clinic or your, how you're building your nutrition, just all of that stuff.
Okay, so yeah, the short story, the long story, the short version of the long story. Way back in the day as a kid, I was not an athlete, not remotely into sports or anything like that at all. Set foot in a gym my first time when I was in grad school, so like early 20s. Found I liked lifting weights and kind of got into a bodybuilding style thing and just gravitated towards nutrition. And so initially that nutrition stuff was, in the bodybuilding world of getting leaner, and it was all about body composition type things. Fairly shortly after that journey, a couple years in, got fairly disillusioned with the world of bodybuilding and went, hey, I just want to be healthy. And, I was just here to like maybe look good in a bathing suit, and like this world's a little intense for me. Happened to read about CrossFit in a muscle and fitness magazine at that same time, where I was like looking for something different. I had my background, like I said, I used to work in the realm of being a financial analyst. So I have an undergrad and a master's degree in finance and marketing management, which is a lot of math-based kinds of things, and using the exact same type of calculus and integrating areas under curves that Greg Glassman proposed as a way to measure fitness. So when I came across that, to me, that just made the most sense of anything I'd ever come across. I went, well, of course, this is how you would measure fitness. Nutrition has always been at the forefront of CrossFit and the methodology. Like we said, it's literally the first line in creating world-class fitness. Enjoyed it as a hobby myself and learning about it, and got increasingly, down the rabbit hole of more and more nerdy understanding of the biochemistry and everything, to the point that people around me were like, you should do something with this. So few years ago, 2021, went back to school, went and got a master's of science in human nutrition, just finished that in June. And now I'm at the point of like, okay, we've taken the most in-depth, journey around to arrive back at the forest view of nutrition and health, which is we need to eat whole foods. We need to eat real things. So now how do we put that into practice with real people? So in my affiliate, my very crafty, handy husband just built an office, a clinic office for me to do more nutritional education, like this type of stuff, course development, teaching, assimilating information out there in the research and bringing it into hopefully like a coherent and digestible format. And then also doing some, individual counseling with people that are looking for more specific help in a variety of ways. Some people need more knowledge, some people need more accountability. Some people, need more specific systems and here's what you're going to eat and here's when. So being able to bring more tools to the people to, help them in whatever way they need to really own their health. I think CrossFit in general, the methodology, including the training and the nutrition, is really just about putting yourself in the driver's seat of your own health. And then having your healthcare team around you to help you navigate wherever you want to go, but empowering people with the knowledge and skills they need to own their health.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, a big thing that we want to try to accomplish too is just share all of the different ways that people are kind of integrating their passions in this space, right? And their different worlds. So I think there's a lot of value in you sharing this life trajectory of yours, right? And how it's brought you to where you are now. But I think what makes you have the potential to be so impactful and effective, right, is your passion for what you love and what you do. And that's something that I always talk with folks about who are looking to integrate these worlds is that it's not about copying what someone else is doing or what I do or what Jocelyn does or what you think you should do, that it has to start with what you're passionate about and the authenticity behind it, right? And that clearly comes through with you. And that's something that, I want to make sure that people get the message, right? Because a lot of folks will show up to conferences or seminars and it's like, tell me exactly what to do, how to build this. And just like starting a good affiliate that's a reflection of the community, right? It's like, this is going to be, whatever your practice is going to be a reflection of your passions and your unique skill set and what you're interested and strong at. So that's, thank you for sharing that. That was great.
Yeah, thank you. I think too, circling back to where we started, last week was tough. It was tough on our community. Everyone's feeling and experiencing the death of Lazar in different ways. People were impacted in different ways. And I think what we come back to, the path to healing is through caring for people, that Jen and I had gone back and forth about like, oh, should we postpone the webinar? What should we do? And I was like, no, I think we should, we decided that proceeding was the right option because what are we talking about here today? It's not just, molecules and amino acids. We're talking about caring for people. We're talking about helping them have a better life and a better future. Yep. And that's the best path forward and the best path towards, healing.
Yeah. And I didn't mention this, but, for everybody who doesn't know, Jocelyn was actually one of the judges at the games as well. So, was there. We were with her this past week as well. So I really appreciate you being here and spending the time with us and sharing your amazing fund of knowledge with everybody. I know this recording will be a treasure for folks to pick through, and your study list, I'm certainly going to pick through and review those and include some of those articles for us to look at going forward more in depth, because I think there's some really great ones there. I'm going to mandate that you come back at some point and do more presentations for us, because you are a treasure trove of knowledge, both nutritional and otherwise. And we got to keep the OGs on here. So it's really fantastic, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much.
Well, it's my honor to be here with you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to, share my passion and talk about nutrition and hopefully provide some tools and knowledge people can use to help other people.
Hell yeah, man.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being here.
Take care.
Bye.